All right, welcome back, Sip&Talkers. We are so glad to have you with us.
Hello, everyone. It is great to be back.
We have an absolute political thriller on our hands today. It's a story that's got everything. We're talking massive online crowds, deep constitutional law questions, and, you know, maybe the digital age's biggest illusion.
That's putting it lightly. We are diving into a political event in Taiwan that is, and I don't use this word often, truly unprecedented in its constitutional history.
Yeah.
We're talking about the formal proposal for the impeachment of President Lai Ching-te, which was announced by the opposition coalition, that's the KMT and the TPP, in late 2025.
And look, this isn't just some run-of-the-mill political squabble. This is a full-blown constitutional earthquake. And it involves data points so big they should, frankly, make your head spin.
Right. You have the official action happening in the legislature, but then it's combined with this truly mind-boggling piece of public information.
Which is?
The online petition, the one claiming over 6 million signatures calling for President Lai's impeachment.
6 million.
6 million. And just to put that in perspective for you, that number actually surpasses the 5.58 million votes he won with in the 2024 election.
So wait, if you take that number at face value, if it were genuine, it would suggest this staggering, almost immediate loss of his popular mandate.
A complete reversal of public will in less than a year.
But, and this is where it gets really, really interesting, while the opposition is pushing this massive boulder of, perceived public opinion, the actual legal machine required to get this done to complete the process is completely broken.
And that's the core tension we are really going to dig into today on Sip and Talk.
Yeah.
Impeachment is on the table, and it's being pushed with this incredible digital number, but the process itself is, for all intents and purposes, potentially impossible.
Because of the ultimate break on the system.
Exactly. The Constitutional Tribunal, which right now is operating with only 8 grand justices.
So on one side, you've got this, let's call it an alleged groundswell of popular will, the 6 million signatures crashing headfirst into a very specific and, frankly, self-imposed legal and procedural roadblock.
So our mission today is to really dissect this whole complex situation. Is this a genuine constitutional crisis? Is it coming from a total breakdown between the executive and legislative branches?
Or is it something else, like a systemic failure of Taiwan's whole semi-presidential structure?
And crucially, we have to look at whether this is, at its heart, a really sophisticated political performance.
Theater.
Totally. A performance designed to test the limits of digital democracy and create the most public outrage possible, regardless of what the final legal outcome is.
Okay, let's unpack this entire constitutional puzzle. And I think we have to start with the spark. The very specific legal action that ignited this whole political firestorm.
The refusal to countersign a law.
Let's get into it. All right, let's drill down into that legal trigger, because it's so important for you to understand that this impeachment push, it didn't come from a traditional scandal.
Right, this wasn't about corruption or some foreign policy disaster.
No. It started with a fundamental argument over the government's checkbook. Specifically, a piece of legislation known as the Financial Allocation Act.
That's right. So for anyone not super familiar with Taiwanese governance, the Financial Allocation Act is, it's the core law. It decides how tax revenue collected by the central government gets split up.
Between the central government in Taipei and all the local city and county governments.
Exactly. It dictates who controls the money for roads, for schools, public services, infrastructure. It's a huge deal.
So what was the situation before this whole fight blew up?
Well, historically, Taiwan's financial structure has been really, really centralized. The ratio of who gets to keep the tax money has been tilted heavily toward the central government.
What kind of split are we talking about?
Roughly 75% for the central government and only about 25% for all the local governments combined.
Wow, okay. That is very centralized. Why was it set up that way?
So the argument from the central administration is that this is necessary. It's to maintain national stability and to fund things you just can't negotiate on, like national defense.
Which is obviously a critical sector given Taiwan's geopolitical situation.
Hugely critical. And also things like foreign policy or, responding quickly to major natural disasters like earthquakes or typhoons. They argue that without that big central pot of money, the core security of the state could be in danger.
Okay, so that brings us to the opposition's amendment. The KMT and TPP, they won a majority in the legislature, and they decided to push for a big change to this act.
Right. Their goal was all about local autonomy and empowerment. They passed an amendment that was designed to really shift that balance. They were aiming for a split closer to, say, 65% central, 35% local.
And I heard some voices were pushing for even more, right?
Oh, yeah. Some in the opposition were even floating a 50-50 split.
That's a massive shift of capital. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars being reallocated from the center to the local level.
Absolutely. The opposition's core argument is pretty straightforward. They say the 75-25 split is just inherently unfair.
And the reasoning is?
They contend that the local governments, the ones that have to deal with everyday services like education, local policing, trash collection, they're basically starved of resources.
So they have to constantly go hat in hand to the central government for money.
Exactly. Begging for special subsidies. And they claim this whole system just kills local autonomy, it promotes patronage politics, and it slows down development everywhere outside of the capital.
Okay, so Parliament, the legislative yuan, passes this amendment. The executive yuan, which is the cabinet led by Premier Cho Jung-tai, they asked for reconsideration, which I understand is pretty standard procedure.
It is. But the legislative yuan rejected that reconsideration, and that's when we hit the flashpoint.
The moment everything changed.
The flashpoint was the premier's refusal, with the full backing of President Lai, to countersign the law.
And that administrative refusal is what the opposition immediately grabbed onto.
They called it a constitutional breach and used it as the launching pad for the whole impeachment proposal.
So explain for us, why is this countersignature so critical in Taiwan's system?
Well, in many semi-presidential or parliamentary systems, the head of the executive, the premier, countersigning a law is often just a formality. It's a signal that the executive branch accepts the responsibility to, actually implement the law.
But by refusing,
the executive branch effectively stopped the law in its tracks. It couldn't be officially announced, and it couldn't be put into force.
And the opposition immediately labeled this an administrative veto.
Precisely. They said it basically strips the legislature of its primary function, which is to make laws.
They started using some pretty strong language.
Oh, yeah. They called the executive yuan a super organ, suggesting it was placing itself above the elected legislature. They argued that if the premier can just unilaterally refuse to enact a law passed by the majority, then the whole idea of separation of powers is destroyed.
And that's where the really aggressive rhetoric started, right? Accusing President Lai of being a dictator and, making these historical parallels to emperors who seized power.
The King Dizong analogy.
Right. But the presidential office, they have a very robust counter-argument to that accusation. They weren't just sitting back and grabbing power. They were. They said they were defending the state.
Their defense hinges on a specific interpretation of constitutional authority. They point to articles, like Article 37, that establish the president's role in maintaining constitutional order.
So their argument is defensive, not offensive.
Exactly. It's not a power grab.
Yeah.
They publicly stated that refusing to countersign was a necessary firewall to protect the state from what they called fiscal chaos.
So they're essentially claiming that the opposition's law was just financially reckless, that it would have endangered national security funding and other essential government services.
Right. They see it as a necessary check against, legislative recklessness.
Yeah.
The administration is basically saying, yes, you have a legislative majority, but if the laws you pass bankrupt the country, the executive branch have a constitutional duty to hit the brakes.
It's a classic clash of interpretations.
Totally. One side is championing the power of a legislative majority, and the other is defending the fiscal stability of the central government. It's a battle over who has the final say in interpreting the constitutional limits on financial power.
And that framing is so important. It moves the conversation away from dictator versus Democrat and into responsible fiscal management versus legislative authority.
And this constitutional deadlock over the national checkbook is what provided all the initial fuel for that huge public push for impeachment. And now we have to pivot. We're going from these dense legal arguments to the just sheer spectacle of the digital battlefield. We absolutely have to analyze that staggering figure of 6 million signatures.
Yes, the 6 million. That is the number that demands scrutiny.
It's the centerpiece of this data war that's drawn global attention.
As we said earlier, it claims to represent roughly 25.5% of Taiwan's entire population of 23.5 million. Just Just sit with that percentage for a second.
It's insane.
1 in every 4 people in the country supposedly signed this petition online. I mean, that is an almost unheard of level of mass participation for any political action, online or offline.
And critically, this digital number is being used as proof of a mandate reversal.
Right, because it's more than the votes he actually got.
By nearly 500,000 signatures. If that figure is accurate and valid, it implies a complete, devastating repudiation of his government's legitimacy.
But this is where we have to apply a reality test. We need to look at the technical red flags.
This is where we need to put on our digital forensics hats.
So what did the engineers and the security researchers find when they actually looked at the platform that was used for this petition? What points to these water army allegations and fake account concerns?
The evidence of manipulation is, it's pretty overwhelming. And it's mostly because of how low the platform's barrier to entry was set.
What do you mean by that?
To sign the petition, all a user had to do was enter a name and an email address.
That's it.
That's it.
Now, in Taiwan, what's the standard secure way to verify your identity online for, serious government actions?
The gold standard is the Natural Person Certificate, the NAC. It's highly integrated with the government ID system, or at the very least, you'd use a robust system with an SMS one-time password, an OTP, to confirm a real person's phone number.
And this petition site used?
None of that. Not even a simple CAPI-TCHA to prove you weren't a bot.
So the platform was essentially by design optimized for volume, not for validity.
Exactly. Any moderately skilled programmer could just write a script to automate the whole input process.
That low barrier is the first most glaring red flag.
But it gets so much worse. Digital engineers who analyzed the website's code and its technical structure found a massive security flaw.
What was it?
The back end was exposed. And some reports say the source code actually revealed an ability to manually set the signature count.
Hang on, wait a second. A manual override. You're telling me someone could theoretically just type in the number 6 spills in 1,000, and the counter on the website would just update, regardless of how many people actually signed?
That is the implication from the technical findings, yes. It means the petition counter was less a reflection of, participatory democracy and more of an easily manipulable display window.
Like a scoreboard in a game?
Exactly. One critic even joked that the only real constraint the organizers had was stopping the count before it surpassed 23 million, the entire population, because that would have been a little too obvious.
That completely transforms the number from a metric of public opinion into, a piece of political theater.
It's damning. It suggests the primary function of the website was what you might call political big data marketing, where you prioritize a high-impact narrative, the big number, over any kind of legal or democratic validity.
Then what about the traffic patterns? Did they look human?
Not at all. There's clear evidence of non-human traffic. Reports documented these abnormal flows peaking at around 2,000 signatures per second.
2,000 per second?
Per second. Mathematically, physically, that rate is impossible for human beings filling out forms online, even if they were super organized. It strongly points to automated scripts, or bots.
It's a water army.
The water army, designed to just flood the count and create this illusion of overwhelming, instantaneous public demand.
So, okay, we can pretty much conclude that the 6 million figure is, at best, vastly inflated and, at worst, largely fabricated for political leverage. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Even if only 1 or 2 million of those signatures were real, what does that still say about the level of genuine public discontent with the government?
And that's a vital point. Look, even a genuine 1 or 2 million represents a significant chunk of the voting population expressing extreme dissatisfaction. But the decision to use data inflation to manufacture the number to such an absurd degree, it actually distracts from and ultimately delegitimizes whatever genuine discontent might actually exist.
So by going for volume over validity, they sacrificed all their credibility.
Entirely.
Let's try to put that inflated 25.5% figure into a global context. How does it compare to historical mass mobilization movements that were actually successful in changing regimes?
That's a great comparison. Take the successful impeachment of Park Geun-hye in South Korea back in 2016. The massive, system-shaking street protests that led to her downfall, they saw participation peaking at maybe 2 million people nationwide.
Okay, 2 million.
In a population of 50 million. So that was a maximum of 4% of the population taking physical, real-world action in the streets.
4%. And it led to the impeachment of a sitting president.
Or Look at Brazil during the successful 2016 impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. The protests there maybe reached 1.5% to 3% of the population.
And these were physical, undeniable movements.
They paralyzed cities. They forced political action.
The conclusion here is just inescapable. If that 6 million digital figure, 25.5%, were anywhere close to authentic, the physical country of Taiwan would be experiencing utter paralysis.
Mass strikes, millions in the streets, a complete breakdown of infrastructure.
Which is demonstrably not the case. It just proves the severe disconnect between digital heat and physical reality. The number is purely a political psychological operation.
It's a calculated attempt to use a vanity metric to generate a narrative of insurmountable popular opposition. A narrative designed to pressure moderate lawmakers and just exhaust the public.
The political theater around the 6 million signatures is one thing, but now we get to what is, for me, the most profoundly ironic twist in this entire story.
Oh, yeah.
The Constitutional Court, the body that is supposed to be the ultimate legal break on any impeachment process.
This is where political strategy slams right into constitutional reality, and the result is this massive self-imposed roadblock by the very people who want the impeachment.
We need to just quickly review the constitutional path for impeachment in Taiwan because it is designed to be extraordinarily difficult.
It is absolutely designed to be the nuclear option, something you rarely, if ever, use.
And it has 3 incredibly high hurdles.
Right. First, the proposal has to be initiated by half of the legislative yuan. The opposition coalition, with their 60 seats, they managed to clear that hurdle.
Okay, hurdle 1 cleared. What about the second step?
The second step is that the proposal has to be passed by 2/3 of the legislative yuan. That means 76 seats are required.
And the opposition only has 62 seats.
Exactly. So they would need a ton of cooperation from the ruling party or a serious wave of defections to pass that motion. This step is already highly, highly unlikely.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, they somehow clear that second hurdle. A legislative miracle happens.
Right.
Then the case moves to the Constitutional Court, which acts as the final trial body.
Exactly. And this is where the constitutional deadlock just slams the door shut. The legal requirement for the final confirmation of an impeachment is written right into the Constitutional Court Act. It requires the agreement of 2/3 of the grand justices.
And the court is supposed to have 15 members, right? The full complement.
There's the full court, yes.
Yeah.
So to convict a president or confirm the impeachment, they would need 10 judges to agree. 10 is the magic number.
Okay, so you need 10 judges to approve the impeachment. What's the reality? What's the composition of the court today?
The reality is that the court currently has only 8 grand justices seated and active.
8. Why are there only 8?
Because the other 7 nominees who were put forward by President Lai have been indefinitely blocked by the opposition parties in the legislative yuan.
This is the moment of peak irony. So the opposition, the same coalition now pushing to impeach the president, is also responsible for paralyzing the judicial branch. Why did they block the nominees in the first place?
Well, their strategic thinking was pretty clear. They were afraid that President Lai would appoint judges they saw as politically friendly to his party, they call them green friends, and that he would pack the court, eroding their ability to challenge him judicially.
So they used their legislative majority to just refuse to approve the nominations.
They kept the court small to maintain their own political leverage.
But in doing so, their attempt to gain leverage by crippling the court has now completely disarmed their own most powerful weapon.
It's the height of political self-sabotage.
By keeping the court small, they dropped the number of sitting judges below that critical 10-person threshold they need to legally even hear the case.
Correct. They successfully prevented the court from being packed, but in the process, they also sealed off the possibility of using that very same court for the ultimate check on presidential power. The court cannot legally reach the quorum of 10 people. It can't officially start the trial, let alone deliver a guilty verdict.
This isn't just irony, it's a structural failure. It just highlights the paralysis that's baked into the current political dynamic. The impeachment push, therefore, it can't be a genuine legal maneuver. It has to be purely political performance.
It's a classic chicken and egg political paralysis. One side tries to assert maximum power in the legislature, passing controversial laws, pushing for impeachment, while at the same time paralyzing the judicial branch that's supposed to check that power.
Which, again, is the ultimate proof that this isn't a dictatorship.
Right. If the system was truly oppressive, the opposition wouldn't even have the power to block judicial appointments in the first place.
It's a key distinction. Political scientists would call this a deadlock or a systemic failure, where different branches just neutralize each other. It's not the same as the ruthless, centralized suppression that the word dictatorship implies.
And that constitutional stalemate brings us directly to what we've been calling the language wars. We have to address the opposition's repeated aggressive use of the term tyranny baozang to describe the exact situation we just analyzed.
A constitutional deadlock.
Stemming from a procedural disagreement over a signature.
It is rhetorical inflation, just pushed to the absolute extreme. They're using the most severe political label you can find for a disagreement that, while it's serious, is fundamentally procedural.
And the problem with this kind of aggressive labeling is that it immediately kicks off a process of cognitive desensitization in the public sphere.
Okay, let's use an analogy to make this really clear for everyone. The spicy food analogy works perfectly here.
Go for it.
Okay, imagine we're grating chili peppers. A procedural disagreement, like arguing over whether the premier was right to refuse the countersignature on that financial act?
No.
That's maybe a mild jalapeno pepper.
Right. It's got some heat, it causes some discomfort, but it's not actually dangerous.
But the opposition is calling that jalapeno super spicy. They're calling it tyranny. They're using the linguistic equivalent of a Carolina Reaper, the hottest pepper in the world, to describe a mild disagreement.
And when you do that, you deplete the vocabulary for everyone else. If you use super spicy, or tyranny, for a mildly spicy procedural issue, what word is left when the real Carolina Reaper shows up?
Exactly. What language do you have left to describe true political violence or pervasive media censorship, mass arrests, mass surveillance?
The public loses its reference point. They've been constantly warned that the current government is super spicy for procedural things, so when true authoritarian heat arrives, they just shrug and say, oh, another day, another tyranny, it's just another jalapeno.
This is the risk of normalization. It's the cry wolf effect, just amplified by high-speed, polarized digital rhetoric.
And this constant state of verbal emergency, it leads to profound political fatigue. People stop engaging because the rhetoric is always at a fever pitch, which makes everything feel equally urgent and at the same time equally false.
So when a genuine existential threat arrives, society has lost its ability to even spot the real danger because its language has been deliberately broken.
And that leads to this critical issue of diluting the suffering of people who are facing real oppression. If Taiwan's constitutional deadlock is tyranny, what vocabulary is left for regions that are suffering genuine systemic state violence?
We're talking about places like Hong Kong after the 2019 crackdowns, the documented state actions in Xinjiang, or, citizens trapped in active war zones.
If we equate a constitutional argument in a functioning democracy, where, by the way, the opposition holds a legislative majority and can freely block judicial appointments, if we equate that with the systematic dismantling of freedoms in Hong Kong, we are engaging in a form of what I'd call cognitive arrogance.
That's a great term for it.
It profoundly minimizes the very real physical suffering of people facing true authoritarianism and state violence.
And the simple fact that these officials can freely criticize the government, propose impeachment, and label the president a dictator on a national stage is, in and of itself, the most profound proof that they are not living under a genuine dictatorship.
And this rhetorical inflation, it carries a profound geopolitical risk, which might be the most serious external consequence of this whole language war.
Explain that risk. Why does Taiwan's choice of internal political language matter so much to Beijing and the international community?
Well, when Taiwan's own elected officials are repeatedly using words like dictator and tyranny to describe their democratically elected government, it hands external powers, specifically the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department, perfect whitewash material.
The logic chain that the CCP can then use internationally is dangerously simple.
It's so simple. They can claim, using Taiwan's own political rhetoric, see, the Taiwanese people themselves say President Lai is a tyranny, he's a dictator. What is the functional difference between him and how we manage things in Hong Kong or on the mainland? Everybody's the same.
And that tactic, it seeks to blur that crucial fundamental line between the functional messiness of a democracy and the absolute repression of authoritarianism.
It's an attempt to equate democratic chaos with authoritarian repression. And that is a profoundly dangerous narrative to let take root globally. It destroys the moral high ground that distinguishes a vibrant, messy democracy from a genuine authoritarian regime, This isn't just a vocabulary problem. It's a strategic vulnerability.
Okay, so let's look now at the presidential office's strategy. How are they dealing with this relentless political and rhetorical assault?
The administration's official response has been pretty strategic and focused on pivoting back to constitutional responsibility and just governance.
So first, how did they tackle that dictator label?
They tackled it head-on with a simple but really potent political judo move. They said the very existence of the impeachment attempt proves the system is working.
Huh. That is really effective framing. They're using the opposition's own aggressive actions as evidence that the constitutional checks and balances are not suppressed, but are actually active and robust.
Exactly. A true dictator would not tolerate impeachment proceedings, nor would they allow the opposition to hold a legislative majority that's capable of blocking their judicial appointments.
So they're leaning into the process.
Right. They emphasize that the administration respects all constitutional actions taken by the legislative yuan. And on the core legal dispute over the Financial Allocation Act, they stood firm, just asserting that the refusal to countersign was a legitimate exercise of executive authority to protect the state from fiscal chaos.
So their defense is still centered on constitutional duty and fiscal responsibility. They're positioning themselves as the protectors of the state's solvency, not as power grabbers.
Mm-hmm. But their second strategic move was maybe more pragmatic. It was about pivoting the public conversation away from political performance and back to the practical necessity of governing.
Which means talking about the budget.
Absolutely. The presidential office publicly called on the opposition to immediately stop the political infighting, the impeachment push and all the rhetoric, and fulfill their most fundamental constitutional duty, focusing on the 2026 general budget.
And that budget process has been stuck for months because of all this political conflict?
It's been stalled in the legislative yuan for 4 months. And critically, there's a hard deadline. It has to be reviewed and passed by December 31st.
So the administration is basically putting the opposition on the defensive.
Right. They're saying, you can play political games with impeachment and 6 million signatures all you want, but the country needs its budget passed to function. Your failure to govern is irresponsible. It shifts the focus from the administration's alleged tyranny to the opposition's alleged irresponsibility.
Smart. Now let's circle back to that 6 million signature count, because the administration's response is also a response to the deeper goal of that whole digital campaign. You called this a digital stress test earlier.
That's the critical term. Digital security research suggests that the primary objective of these massive, unverified online campaigns is often not to achieve the legal objective, which we've already established is impossible because of the 8 grand justices.
So the goal is something else.
The goal is to destroy public faith. It's to create a pseudo-majority perception that looks real enough to cause self-doubt and chaos.
So the goal isn't impeachment, it's social exhaustion.
Precisely. The ultimate aim of this calculated data inflation, this fake 6 million, is to systematically destroy public trust in all statistical information.
How does that work?
Well, when the public sees an official verified election result, 5.58 million votes, and it's directly contradicted by a massive digital counter 6 million unverified signatures, they start to lose faith in every number the state presents.
Economic data, public health stats.
Election integrity itself. It ultimately leads to social exhaustion and despair about the whole democratic process. And you end up with that cynical conclusion, what's the point? Everything is fake.
And that despair is fertile ground for external actors who are looking to exploit democratic instability.
Immediately so. The second that 6 million signature claim broke, we saw immediate coordinated geopolitical amplification.
From where?
Chinese state media. High-profile outlets like the Global Times immediately amplified the count. They didn't frame it as a political disagreement. They framed it as overwhelming public discontent and irrefutable evidence that the Lai government was unstable and illegitimate.
And they weren't exactly subtle about their narrative either. I remember seeing reports that they were using sophisticated AI-generated images and really high-impact language.
Oh yeah, specifically branding President Lai as an emperor or a warlord, invoking these historical figures who centralized power illegally. It was a direct parallel to the opposition's dictator rhetoric.
It's a textbook example of cognitive warfare.
Absolutely. You take an internal democratic dispute, you inflate the data to create chaos, and then you use your state media to externalize that chaos to the international community. They present it as proof that the entire democratic system is failing and that Taiwan's elected leaders are, fundamentally no different from authoritarian ones.
The whole operation, from the low-security petition site to the immediate coordinated amplification by foreign state media.
It suggests a highly focused strategy that's aimed at deep internal destabilization, not a genuine democratic change.
We have covered so much ground here. I mean, from the granular legal dispute over the Financial Allocation Act and the countersignature, through the technical absurdity of the 6 million signature campaign, and then finally to the ultimate self-imposed legal trap of the missing grand justices.
Indeed. This constitutional crisis, it's a battle being waged on multiple fronts. You've got the battle over authority, who controls the state's money, the battle over language, what is the real definition of tyranny, and the battle over data credibility. Is 6 million real, or is it manufactured?
And all of this is playing out under the shadow of this impossible legal hurdle that the opposition itself created. It's a profound stress test, not just on the government's resilience, but really on the public's ability to maintain rational verification.
The ultimate takeaway here has to be that in modern politics, strategic narrative can often completely supersede legal reality.
The impeachment attempt was never designed to succeed in a courtroom.
Not at all. It was designed to create political pressure and a powerful, though manufactured narrative of irresistible popular opposition.
And that narrative requires pushing rhetorical bounds to the point of breaking them, using terms like tyranny until they're basically meaningless.
Which, brings us back to simple everyday context.
It says, let's ground this whole thing again. If I brew the coffee too bitter next time, are you going to call it poison?
I would definitely call it a constitutional crisis of the palate. But I wouldn't demand your impeachment or claim 6 million of our listeners signed a petition against your coffee brewing skills.
And that is the essential difference, right? We can debate, we can vehemently disagree, we can even get genuinely frustrated, but we still have shared, verifiable metrics for truth and reality in our discussion.
The danger arises when those shared metrics are intentionally destroyed.
And that's the point we have to leave you, our listener, with today. The most vital question coming out of this whole saga is this. What happens when digital rhetoric inflated by bots, intentional leaks, and manual overrides becomes so extreme that it completely loses touch with physical, verifiable reality?
What must you do as an informed citizen to maintain rational verification and contextual awareness in an age where data warfare seeks to intentionally destroy public trust in all statistical information?
Your ability to verify, to contextualize, and to remain calm is your most potent defense against both political manipulation and systemic fatigue.
Those are fantastic points. We really hope you appreciated this deep exploration of Taiwan's incredibly complex political climate.
If you loved this Sip and Talk, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your episodes. It really helps us out.
And don't forget to check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, for some fun memes and the latest travel vlogs.
Until next time, we'll be back soon with more insights.